Hey there. I thought that I would share my process of creating S-stubs that are good for contact, so that maybe people who were attempting to make their own would have a good idea of what's required. So this is the shape that I made recently, and it's mostly round, and it's a little bit flat here to make it so that two slap together if you want to do completely planar style spinning. And they're very good for this plane and for rolling and for contact stuff that's kind of odd and awkward a lot of the time, but some of it's next level shit, I think. So the first thing you can do is create, if you don't have a router table, if you have a router table, you probably know better how to do what you're doing anyway. But what I did is I created these templates that you can use one of these bits to follow along when you clamp a piece of plywood on it. So you cut out a rough chunk of plywood that is about the shape that you want. Then you clamp it over the top. Then you cut in through the side with this trim bit, and you want to make sure that when you cut the path that it's deeper than the bit and the head, and that you don't cause the bit and the head to roll along, because then you'll ruin the bearing and the head, and they're expensive. So okay, so after you've roughly cut out the plywood and you've routed it out along the path, you can keep it clamped like you have, and I had to change the clamps around quite a bit from different positions. And you can probably use little nails, but I didn't bother because I wasn't making very many of them. But you can keep it clamped, and then after you cut it out that way, you use a circular routing bit to smooth the edges around. And it's kind of frustrating if you're using scrap plywood like I was, because there's lots of little imperfections, and you'll get little divots, and little divots like this are where you're going to get breaks. So if you use something called Baltic Birch, thank you Chelsea, then, which I haven't bought any of yet, but that's supposedly what you want to use if you want something more solid than mine. So okay, so after you've routed them out to be circular, you have to do two to make each half of it. So the other side, they have like a left-handed, right-handedness, like, so that you can make two pieces that fit in along each other, so that one is one way and the other is the other way. And that's really just for the curved part, since they're the same shape. And after you cut out one template, you're going to want to cut a piece with that template, and then use that pattern to create the other template. Because you cut it on one side, smooth it on one side, but then you need this piece too. So you use the other direction on the other template. So that's probably more time consuming than actually creating the pair, is creating the templates that match each other roughly. So after you have both sides, you can fit them together and wood glue them together and clamp them together. And hold the clamps for an hour, don't touch them for a day. Just like messing with them. I mean, take the clamps off in an hour, but don't move them around and flex the joints at all for a day. or you'll end up with lots of like dried wood glue that isn't actually stuck together. So after you've got the pieces cut out, what I ended up doing is, for the center joint, is I used a dowel that I cut using a dovetail saw to match the shape of the curves. So after you've cut those, see if they all fit together, all three, and then adjust them. You probably won't get it right the first time. And then glue those, let those dry for a day without touching it. I suppose I should mention how I used the dowel, or used a regular dowel to make a somewhat flat dowel. Like this direction is a little bit flatter than this direction, and that causes more slimness. That makes it easier to spin in the plane, and it's more comfortable in your hand. So I use a belt sander, just a cheap belt sander, that's clamped to my work table. And that's probably not safe, so might wanna, if you can afford one, just get a belt sander that is a standing belt sander, because yeah, maybe I shouldn't show that, but that's what I've been doing. You'll get catches if you use a belt sander in that way, where you're running it along, it'll kick and your hand will go into the belt sander. So you have to be really careful. What I like to do is use the end of a long dowel, like, so your hand's like way back there and you're not like anywhere near it. Or you can wear really good gloves or something. So after you've glued it together into 3 pieces, I actually sanded the outer parts first and then glued it together. So I sanded all 3 parts and glued it. This is not important, but routing it with the curved router blade isn't going to really create a smooth edge like you want. So I spent a lot of time making it smooth. And let me see what else. For a fire one, I used 1/8 inch wick, and that took like an hour, 2 hours a wick. It was ridiculous. Use 1/4 inch, and I couldn't hardly even get very far up the prop. So rather use 1/4 inch wick. And I put some bike tube underneath, and then put some gel grip tape on this one. I actually like the stuff without gel grip tape too, but kind of like a little spring in it, because it makes it more ergonomic. But you don't want it to be too wide. If you start putting too much stuff on it, like this one sort of has, then it gets so that you can't finger spin as easily and you drop it a lot. But still experimenting with the width here. If I was told by Bink that you can stain it with the lighter color first, and then paint, and then put painter's tape over that after it dries for a day, and then do the dark color where the painter's tape isn't. I did it backwards. I put the light one on after, and there's a lot of bleeding in the darker stain. So that's 10 minutes. I think I'm done anyway. Good luck.